As you saw in the previous sub-lesson, there are a ton of preferences that we can work with. We're going to continue on with that conversation and look at some additional desktop preferences. We obviously can't go through all of them, so in addition to printers and power options in the registry, I'm going to focus on a couple more in here, and then we'll take a step out to our image and take a peek at that. The user configuration node under Windows settings is where you can go in and define the network drive mappings. And with all of these settings, you have configurable options, and not all of them will be available depending on what configuration setting. But when you do configure a new setting, you have these 5 options to choose from. And the first is stop processing items in this extension if an error occurs, run in logged on user security context, remove this item when it is no longer applied, apply once and don't reapply, and then item level targeting, which is similar to the filtering that we talked about with GPOs. Configuring shortcut deployment. This is available under both the user and computer configuration nodes, and we can use this to provide shortcuts to objects that the users use quite frequently. For instance, a file system object or a URL or even a shell object. That's another key preference for you to configure. In addition to that, we also have file and folder deployments available in both the user and computer configuration nodes as well. And when it comes to toasting that folder or deleting that folder, we can choose to delete this folder only if it's emptied, recursively delete all subfolders if they're emptied, so it'll drill down through to your subfolders, delete all files in the folders, notice no indication of whether or not it's empty or not, allow deletion of read-only files / folders, or ignore errors for files and folders that cannot be deleted, which means move on and toast anyways. So these are file and folder deployment options that you'll have when you're working with configuring file and folder preferences. And lastly is the item level targeting. This is where we use filtering to determine whether preferences are applied. Very similar to what we saw when applying GPO policies. Remember there we had security where we targeted specific users or groups, or we would apply or choose not to apply a GPO policy based on the specific user or computer. And we could look at things like the operating system to determine whether or not that was going to be applied. Well, similar to that, we have item level targeting here in the preferences, and that is access to the common tab. After you've configured your general preference properties, in fact, it'll stop you and say, dude, in order for me to go to the common tab, I need some information on this general tab. You complete that information that's required. You then go to the common tab, and you can choose one of these 5 options here to configure item level targeting. Let's step out to our live image and explore these group policy preferences. So here we are in the GPMC. We're going to go to the MTP good stuff, right click and go into the GPME, the editor. And you see we have under computer configuration policies, which we've spent some time in, as well as user configuration, which also has policies. And notice they both have preferences. So if I expand on preferences under computer, Windows settings and control panel settings. I'll do the same under user, same 2 options. Let's expand under computer Windows settings. You'll see that we have these 7 items here under Windows settings for computer, Windows settings for the user. We have these 8 items here. So there's a little bit of a difference between what settings within each of these categories. Let me collapse these 2. Let's go to the control panel settings for each. And you'll see, again, we have somewhat of a different experience depending on whether you're under user or computer. I'm going to go ahead and collapse computer so it's not so busy up here. And we're going to go to power options on user, and we're going to right click, and we're going to choose new, and it's going to give me options based on what I'm trying to configure. So obviously you're not going to see these options if you're trying to configure folder options. So we're going to go power plan at least Windows 7. And then here's my actions. I told you we can do a create, a replace, an update, or delete. So we're going to go ahead and do a create. And then let's make this simple. Let's go into sleep mode, and we're going to say sleep after. Notice we have that green line. That means it's configurable. So we'll click on that. We'll say sleep after 5 minutes on battery. And then when it's plugged in, we'll say sleep after 10 minutes. I'm not going to save this anyways because I don't want to mess anything up on my DC here and my machine attached to it. And also this particular one also has options for balanced, high performance, or power saver. These are the same settings we'd see inside of the control panel. Notice also we have this common tab here. This is where I have 5 options that I can configure. And the first one indicates if an error does occur, all the preferences configured in the GPO are not processed. The next one is to determine what logged on user security context that this preference is going to be associated with. The third one is remove the item when it's no longer applied. Ironically, the preferences continue to apply even after the preference item is removed. Apply once and do not reapply. This is going to override the default GPL refresh behavior. And then as we talked about, we have the item level targeting. Let's go ahead and peek at that one. I'm going to click on that. Go to targeting. And we're going to say on the left-hand side, new item. And let's go with operating system. Windows 10 operating system. So we're actually applying filtering as to when this preference will be applied. Any addition, any release, any computer role. I'll go ahead and do an OK. And then again, I would do an OK. And now we've created a power plan using the power option within the control panel settings of the preferences of the user configuration mode of the group policy management editor, which is a subset of the group policy management console. So these are the steps regarding preferences and how we use preferences and configure preferences from inside of GPMC.